This story begins in a rundown computer club. There the guys discuss the appearance of a new character card in the game Dungeon Craft. A guy named Kel took this card first, causing others to say that he was literally a monster. After all, he always manages to take first place immediately after the release of the cards. They also discuss that perhaps Kel uses bots, because it is simply impossible otherwise. Kel sat next to his friend who asked him why he was constantly buying food here if he was making so much money. To which Kel replied that the food here was very tasty. After that, Kel said with a smile that he was going to take first place again. His friend replied that Kel was a real scumbag, because he spoke as if taking first place was a given. After these words, Kel suddenly became serious, because in fact they were right, and he really had fun being in this game. Creating maps in the game world was more than a hobby for our hero. A few hours later, when the boys were tired, they decided to go home. Kel and his friend walked out of the computer club. Kel went for a walk, and along the way he thought that if he was ever asked why he was so obsessed with this game, he would answer that there was nothing in the real world that he could control. After all, in the game he can easily do all sorts of things, but in the real world everything seems impossible. Even these useless pillars cannot be moved. And in the game, Kel could change their shape and size with just a couple of clicks. As Kel was crossing the road, he heard the sound of an approaching car and stopped in fear. But the truck managed to brake at the last moment. Kel looked at all this with the thought that this was really creepy. Meanwhile, the driver climbed out of the window and asked, "Is our hero really tired of living?" Kel slowly raised his hand and pointed towards the traffic light, on which a green light was depicted. The driver looked at the traffic light and wondered, when did it turn green? Kel ignored the question and moved on, thinking that he was fed up with everything. After all, if he could change things in real life like in the game, then everything would be much easier. After all, Kel could create the worlds of his dreams. Walking past the construction site, Kel saw that something had gone wrong. A huge iron beam had broken off, and she was preparing to fall right on the little girl who froze in place from fear. Kel also stopped for a second, after which he rushed forward with all his might and threw the girl away. The girl still couldn't move from fear. In front of her lay Kel, crushed by a beam. A few minutes later, Kel died from multiple fractures and blood loss. But instead of seeing the afterlife, Kel found himself in a strange place. Kel didn't understand what was happening and wondered, was he really not dead? Suddenly he heard someone's voice. A monster immediately appeared in front of him and asked how our hero got hellish oblivion, after which the monster smiled and said that it was time to face reality. Looking into the eyes of this monster, Kel asked in a nervous voice who was in front of him, "And what is this hellish oblivion?" The monster said with a wide smile that death is only a path to rebirth. Kel found himself right in front of the face of this huge creature that I was talking about, and now Kel remembers everything. Kel, already angry, continued to shout and ask what was going on here and demanded a normal explanation. But the monster only said loudly that now Kel would open his eyes for the first time in his life, after which a bright flash illuminated everything around. And the next second, Kel, in another body, was in a strange building. Once here, Kel first looked around. He asked in surprise, "Is this really a castle?" After which he noticed his reflection, and he looked at the new body, unable to believe what had just happened. Once the shock wore off, Kel wondered in a cold sweat, had he really been reborn just like in the anime? He looked at his new body again, thinking that everything here seemed so real that this was definitely not it. After that, Kel looked around again, wondering where he had ended up, since he had the feeling that he was in some ancient castle. And the next second, our hero was cut down by a blade. Kel looked at the pile of iron sticking out of his chest and tried to understand what was going on here. Meanwhile, the girl with crazy eyes suddenly pulled out her weapon. After that, she ran up to our hero and asked how he felt. Kel looked at the huge hole in his body in complete shock. After that, he looked at the girl and asked why she did this. The girl with white hair asked why Kel was asking such a stupid question, after which she swung her blade and said that she hated her opponent and therefore was trying to get rid of him. Kel wondered if she really wanted to kill him, even though he had just been reborn. Suddenly, another man appeared who snatched the weapon from her hands. The girl immediately pointed her finger at him and asked, "Why is he getting involved in their squabbles again?" The guy opened some kind of potion and asked the girl to calm down, because she shouldn't behave like that with her brother. Kel, meanwhile, was trying to understand what was going on here and who were these people in front of him. The man, meanwhile, leaned over, gave her the potion, and asked if her little sister was really bullying her younger brother again. Kel took the elixir from his hands and drank it immediately. After that, the guy asked, did Kel really just believe that this was a healing potion? Kel realized too late that he was right there, and then emptied his stomach. And what he drank burned his throat incredibly badly. Our hero's new sister leaned over and asked if the guy was really going to die now, after which she sadly said that she wanted to kill him with her own hands. The guy with long hair replied that it was unlikely that Kel would die, but he was clearly in pain. After which he sadly added that, unfortunately, the new recipe also turned out to be a failure. Kel, meanwhile, was clutching his throat and trying to understand why he was suffering all this time. Suddenly, the door to the castle opened. Someone announced that the Demon King had returned from a heroic hunt. Kel looked ahead. And I saw my new so-called father. The man looked at our hero and asked why he was hearing that nasty noise again. Our hero's brother and sister tried to explain something. However, the Demon King immediately appeared in front of them and grabbed them by the throat. He squeezed their necks with the words that the echo of the weak acetones in the walls of the Demon King's castle is humiliation. Our hero's brother and sister began to ask for forgiveness and beg their father to have mercy. Kel was finally convinced that these two were his brother and sister, and this means that the Demon King is his father. The Demon King looked at our hero and said that in his castle, he wanted to hear only two sounds, the sound of the birth of the great demon, and the sound of noble death. With these words, he kicked our hero with all his might and threw him away, leaving all his children on the floor. Kel watched the demon leave and thought that he really had been reborn in another world, becoming the son of the Demon King. Because of all this, Kel only thought that he was in complete ass, and he tried to understand why he ended up in this particular situation. Was there really no one better to play the role of father? The world around him faded. Kel saw strange memories. There, he is still a very small demon who is crying because his sister poked him in the eye with a fork. Suddenly, a woman appeared in the memory. She hugged the child and said that he was probably in pain. Kel, with tears in his eyes, asked his mother to help him because his brother had poisoned his food. Our hero's mother smiled and said that in that case, Kel should take revenge just like demons do. Kel, with tears in his eyes, screamed that if he did this, they would kill him. His mother replied with a smile that in that case, Kel should kill them before they did it. She moved a little closer and told him that the Demon King, our hero's father, killed 12 brothers before becoming the Great Demon King. So if someone tried to kill the demon, you just had to destroy the offender. Immediately after these words, Mom took out a dagger and stuck it into her son's stomach. Then she hugged him and said that this is how demons do things. Suddenly, Kel woke up with a loud scream. In front of him was a maid who wished him good morning. Kel, meanwhile, was thinking that he had been reborn in the body of his former owner and was now seeing his memories. After this, Kel checked his body and saw that all his wounds were completely healed. This means that he has incredible regenerative abilities. The maid looked around and said that Kel had been sleeping for quite a long time, after which she added that very soon the family expenses would begin, so she asked our hero to stand up. Kel dug into the memory of the former owner of this body and remembered that this was a personal servant named Rin, and the former owner of this body was much shyer than his brother and sister, so he was always despised. Kel also recalled how, as a child, a maid asked to wear his suit for a celebration, to which Kel replied that he had heard that his brother and sister were dressed by servants. Hearing this that day, the maid turned away and said, "In that case, Kel will also have to help her dress." Kel immediately apologized and said that he could handle it himself. There were also times when it was necessary to clean the blanket. Kel said that it was her job. However, she ignored him and Kel did it himself. There were also times when he came home and the maid was sleeping in his place. And of course, there were times when she simply left the doll in her place and went about her business. Now Kel looked at the maid while he was getting dressed and tried to understand how the former owner of this body could allow such a disdainful attitude towards you, the son of the Demon King. Kel straightened up with confidence. The maid was surprised when she noticed that now Kel walked with his head held high. Meanwhile, Kel decided that he would change his life. After some time, Kel came into the hall for a joint meal, and his father immediately reminded him that being late in this house is not allowed. Kel looked into his father's eyes, thinking that his presence was truly fearsome, so it was no wonder that he became the Demon King. Kel sat down at his seat, saying that he apologized for being late, and his sister instantly plunged a blade into his leg, which made Kel wince. The sister said with a smile that Kel didn't seem very energetic and suggested that he eat more. Kel, meanwhile, was thinking that he couldn't even imagine what would happen to him if they found out who he really was. So Kel decided to hide it. He bent down a little and thanked her. As soon as Kel took his first sip of soup, he immediately realized that this was all me. His brother said with a smile that he had prepared the soup especially for our hero. Kel looked at him with a displeased face and said that the soup was so delicious that it was hard to resist. After that, He looked at everyone around him and thought that this was not his family. With complete confidence, I thought that I would no longer allow them to mock me and decided that I needed to do something. Kel always wanted to achieve something on his own, and through his thinking, he became the strongest card maker in the game he played his entire life. However, in real life, everything was not so fabulous. Kel was constantly bullied. He was good for nothing, but now everything will change. Kel was determined that he was not going to die such a miserable death, after which Kel stood up a little. But I took the poisoned soup and turned to my sister. The sister wanted to ask something, but before she could do anything, Kel threw a bowl of soup in her face with all his might and said that she should also try her brother's beautiful soup. After this, Kel pulled the blade out of his leg, and he stuck it into his brother's shoulder, asking him to check out the gift from his sister. Karla Demonov was incredibly surprised by his son's behavior. Kel, meanwhile, took hold of the edges of the table and asked, "Why the hell would demons gather at the table and pretend to be a happy family?" After which Kel abruptly turned the table over and shouted loudly that it would be better for them all to eat separately. The Demon King was incredibly surprised by such changes in his son. The brother and sister also could not understand what was happening to our hero. After this, Kel decided to go for a walk. He was thinking that he was having a wonderful day today, and the maid was trying to understand what was happening to him. Kel was happy because despite the fact that he was beaten to a half-dead state for turning over the table, he still fully recovered in a very short time. Kel looked at his hand, thinking that there was some unknown power flowing through it. This means that he is indeed the son and heir of the Demon King. Kel sat on the edge of the ledge trying to understand how powerful his power was. After some time, the maids turned to the young master and said that classes on demonic energy would soon begin, so he needed to go there quickly. But Kel drank her down and said that he knew about it, after which he told him in a cold tone to stop ordering him around. Kel immediately turned away without waiting for an answer, leaving the maid completely bewildered. Why did Kel suddenly become so insolent? Now Kel was thinking that the classes on demonic energy, the studio on the memories of the previous owner of this body, were some of the worst tests in his life. However, Kel decided that he had no reason to miss them, after which he immediately went to class. It looked like a demon school. In front of them stood a teacher who said that His Highness Tarmi and Her Highness Zeldera, the brother and sister of our hero, would not join today. Kel looked around and thought that he knew these guys from the memories of the former owner of this body. They constantly bullied and beat him. They are real demons who catch you when you bully the weak, and our hero's brother and sister supported the others in this and said that there was no need to be polite, and they could mock their brother to the fullest extent. Kel suffered through this every time he was in demonic training. However, he understood perfectly well that the former owner of this body was not a weakling. He just had a huge and kind heart. Kel looked at his body again and thought that this time everything would be different. Smiling, Kel decided to channel his power into the right direction. The teacher said it was time to start and asked who fought in the last lesson. The red-haired demon pointed at our hero and said that it was them, after which he added with a smile, "Should he really have spoken to the young master?" And with a smile he apologized for his joke, while Kel was already angry. The teacher called both of them to the center and said that it was time to hold the second duel. The red-haired guy charged his hands with demonic energy and asked if Kel was ready. The other students thought that the young master would be beaten half to death again. Someone even said that your hero was probably tearing himself apart like a girl again. Because of this, Kel thought that he was in many ways similar to the former owner of this body, because in his past life, he was not rich, and he was also not strong, so everyone looked down on him. However, Kel confidently decided that all this was now in the past. He enveloped his entire body in energy, causing his opponent to tremble in fear. The other students were also surprised. They asked the question, "Is this really the same Kel?" Our hero's opponent noticed that he couldn't even move from his place due to such high pressure. Kel rushed at him like that, saying that today he would show him his strength by hitting him only once. And with one blow he knocked this big guy down, slamming him into the ground. The students couldn't believe it, because our hero's opponent didn't even have time to react. The worried teacher wondered if everything was okay with our hero's enemy. This guy lost half of his teeth. He called out our hero's name, causing Kel to freeze in place and ask who gave him permission to address the Demon King's son by name. The student immediately apologized to His Highness. Kel stood up slowly and advised him not to make such mistakes again. The others tried to understand how Kel did it, because on the surface he seemed to be the same loser as always. After this, Kel looked at the teacher and suggested continuing the lessons. The worried teacher immediately agreed. Our hero's maid, who was watching all this, stood there in complete bewilderment. Thoughts were spinning in her head that something was definitely wrong with our hero. And so it happened that on this very day, the Demon King decided to check on the school. He looked at his son, who had just fought back for the first time in his life. Meanwhile, our hero's brother and sister were in the healing baths. The sister was screaming about how Kel, like a real bastard, threw poisoned soup at her. And the brother responded that she should calm down and focus on recovery. After all, unlike their brother, they do not have the same incredible recovery as him. The princess immediately screamed that this was also strange and asked why only he had this ability. After a short pause, our hero's brother said that most likely Kel had changed. Inside, he thought about how when Kel flipped the table, it was only for a moment, but the Demon King could be seen smiling for the first time in his life. The sister also noticed this and asked how this bastard made his father smile too. Our hero's brother sat in the bathtub and said that things were really bad. The sister moved closer to him and asked, what should they do? However, he replied that she would probably rather die than decide to unite with someone. After that, he looked at her with a smile and said that they could temporarily arrange a truce and deal with our hero. The girl smiled and said that it was a good idea, after which they agreed to hover. Until they kill our hero, they will be together until he again attracts the attention of his father. The students moved into the classroom. The teachers created a projection and explained that the man in front of them was the former Demon King, Turk Khaldun. I looked at him at the heroes and thought that he looked like a real and crazy maniac. The teacher meanwhile said that this Demon King was the strongest in his time, but died as a result of a vile conspiracy arranged by the Heavenly Guild. And since then, guilds of opponents have been gathering near the Demon Kingdom. Kel immediately thought that in the memory of the former owner of this body, they occupy a special place. After all, it was because of these scumbags that Kel couldn't escape from the castle in the past. He was full of sadness because he would have to spend his whole life here. Meanwhile, the teacher was talking about how these scoundrels, led by the Heavenly Guild, were preparing to attack the Demon Kingdom. Therefore, in order to help His Majesty the Demon King, the students must put all their efforts into training and become stronger. After this lesson, our heroes went to the roof of the building on the 5th floor. He looked into the distance and thought about the need to find a way out of here. Because if you stay here, then Kel can die at any moment. Because of this whole crazy family. Kel turned to his maid and asked when the duel would begin, and she immediately replied that it would be in 3 days. Kel stood up slowly and asked if she knew that this castle had one weak spot. The maid tried to understand where such changes in our hero came from. And Kel, noticing the confusion on her face, said that they did not have a cartographer who could help use the terrain in battle. Kel said that the abandoned areas around the castle play into the guild's hands. Kel looked ahead and stated with complete confidence that he was going to spend the time before the next expedition mapping these territories. Kel smiled and said that he was going to help, to destroy every single enemy. However, inside, Kel was thinking that now was the perfect time to prepare for escape. Kel also thought that now he was no longer in his reality, which meant he could create any map. After these thoughts, he looked at the maid and shouted for her to go and set up an office for him in the dungeon of the castle. The girl asked why he needed an office, to which Kel also shouted. Answered that he needed a room where he could work in secret of his father. The Demon King, at this time taking a healing bath, thought that Kel would not hide from him. After that, I went to do my business before it was too late. In short, the demons wanted to make sure of something. A few hours later, the maid brought our hero into the office as he asked. Kel immediately shouted that for the son of the great Demon King, he was somehow too simple. The maid, with small tears in her eyes, replied that this was all she could do in secret. Kel yelled at her to do her job properly, then sat down at the table thinking that he had gone to treat her more harshly. The girl, meanwhile, with wet eyes, thought that now this was not at all the Kel she knew. However, in her eyes, he suddenly became incredibly cool. Kel noticed this look and said that she should not stand idle, asking for coffee. At last, Kel was left alone with himself. He opened the map and thought that the Demon King's castle was simply hopeless, after which I prepared to start creating a normal map. The maid ran thinking that she should bring coffee as quickly as possible, when suddenly she stopped, because she did not know what coffee was. Suddenly, the Demon King appeared in front of her and asked what she was doing alone in this perfumery. The girl looked at him in fear and asked the demons where his son was. The girl was silent for a second, and then the Demon King ordered her to answer. Meanwhile, Kel worked on the map and thought about how lucky he was, because this world is in many ways similar to the game. Kel was happy because nothing brought him as much pleasure as creating maps. Well, a few seconds later, someone unexpectedly knocked down the door to his room. The Demon King appeared before him and said that he couldn't believe that his son had set up a secret office here without telling him. Kelstvi looked at his father, trying to figure out how he even figured it out. However, while Kel was thinking about this, his father quickly approached and plunged his blade into his stomach. The father bowed down to his son and said that if Kel was planning to kill the king, he should not be a coward and do it directly. Kel, meanwhile, was suffering because the pain was on a completely different level than his brothers and sisters. Because of this, Kel even thought that he might even die from this. Kel realized that he needed to get out of this situation, after which he abruptly took out the map and showed it to his father. The man looked at her and asked what it was. Kel quickly said that the area around the castle was too disadvantageous in fighting against the guilds. However, if they change the geography as he drew, it will greatly help in the upcoming battles. The man immediately pulled the blade out of his son's stomach and asked why the secrecy was needed then. Kel looked at his father and said that if he had just come to his father and said that he wanted to help, his father would not have allowed it. So he decided that he would come when he finished his map. Kel looked into his father's eyes and said that as the son of the Demon King, he was going to help in the destruction of heaven. The maid looked at all this and thought that Kel had simply lost his fear of saying such things to his majesty. However, unexpectedly the king asked how long it would take. Kel asked Matsuridu a question, and then the Demon King asked again, "How many days does it take our hero to prepare his map?" Kel was incredibly happy, because he didn't expect the Demon King to be able to understand his sketches, after which he took out his hand and showed 5 fingers. The Demon King immediately said that this was too much because their opponents would appear in 3 days, after which he turned around with guns stating that our hero's map would be useless. Kel suddenly said that he didn't mean 5 days but 5 hours. In short, he looked at his son with surprise. Kel raised the map in front of him and said that they would have 3 days to complete the trade before the battle with the heavens, after which he asked him to take on the entire implementation of the plans. The Demon King turned around, smiled slightly and said that he gave the go-ahead. But in the end, he said that if Kel couldn't cope, he would be torn to pieces. Kel smiled and said he agreed, after which the Demon King came out of this, no longer so secret room. Kel thought that he had completed the task, but finally he held out and vomited blood. Kel wondered if his father would have killed his own son if he had been of no use. Rin, meanwhile, looked at our hero and thought that he managed to convince the Demon King himself. Kel looked at her and loudly asked why she stood rooted to the spot. Take him to Lazarus. After 5 hours, the map was ready as promised. The entire workforce of the castle began to build the necessary structures, beyond which the wizards cast illusory spells, changing the landscape so that no one would notice. Kel thought that he was creating another map of his favorite game, and everything was going exactly according to his plan. Meanwhile, at the guild camp, the warlord was incredibly surprised when I found out that they were changing the surrounding area. His assistant said that they found out that they were trying to deceive people using illusion magic. The chief wondered what these demons were up to, after which the servant asked if he should stop them. To which the head replied that under no circumstances should this be done, because it's pointless, it's already too late. After all, in 3 days the strongest detachment Tolkien will arrive. This squad began to form decades ago, and now its ranks are finally filled. The leader laughed and said that the enemies would not be able to defeat the best squad of elite warriors in a measly 3 days, after which he added that the Great Demon King would be defeated after this period. This squad was already moving forward at full speed, because in 2 days they would already reach the castle of the Demon King. Holding their weapons above themselves, they shouted that the demons would be destroyed once and for all, and the castle will be burned to the ground. The red-haired girl looked at this and thought that the general was simply incredible. Her name was Commander Cirrus, and now a servant rode up to her and asked if they could definitely win. The commander smiled and said that their squad is different from all the other guilds, and they are doing everything to make these demons die. The Demon King, meanwhile, sat on his throne instead of fifth. He thought that his son had not lied about the map. However, the Demon King also thought that he had to admit that she was not perfect. He looked at his shaking hands, thinking that his body was almost at its limit. So now was not the time to nitpick, because tomorrow will finally come the day when the heavens will fall. The work was in full swing. Kel looked at this from the window and thought that everything was going smoothly. However, it didn't have the same feeling as creating cards for the game. Kel thought that he was really surprised that he could actually create and change the landscape, and all that was left was to wait for the battle between hell and heaven. Kel came up with the idea that tomorrow would be the day that would change his destiny. Finally, the day of battle came. Tolkien's detachment arrived at the right place. The head of heaven came out to them and thanked them for what they had done. Such a long remote control, the squad general said that they would destroy the Demon King, after which the gray-haired man immediately declared that they would not wait and would immediately go to his castle. The man raised his hand high into the air and declared that the attack was beginning. Suddenly, some strange magic appeared right in front of their feet. The general immediately ordered everyone to take up defensive positions because a sudden invasion had occurred. A second later, the Demon King himself appeared in full height before them. Some time ago, Kel said that he removed the barrier that focuses the magic of heavenly observation, and now they can use teleportation magic without being noticed. The Demon King said that teleporting directly into the enemy zone sounds very risky. Our hero's sister asked, "Does father really want to do this?" And our hero's brother said that it was too dangerous even for the Demon King. In short, the demons looked at them and asked in a cold tone, "Do his children really doubt the power of the Demon King?" The brother and sister immediately began to talk about how their father had misunderstood them. After all, they were simply worried because he had not fully recovered. The Demon King stood up and ordered them all to shut up. He said that he would make the decision himself and single-handedly invaded the heavenly base, finding himself in front of his enemies. People were running around and shouting that this bastard had caught them by surprise. And the general himself shouted that, in addition to the demons, he would regret that he came here and got involved with them. He then ordered his squad to launch a full-scale attack against the Demon King. Meanwhile, Kel stood at the top of the castle and thought that all forces were gathered and everything was going according to plan. Kel shouted loudly that the preparations were complete and ordered everyone to attack. The heavens quickly noticed the locked army of demons approaching them, but to their surprise, they also broke through from underground, and they attacked at the most unexpected moments and places. Kel looked at all this and thought that everything was going strictly according to plan. Suddenly, his brother and sister showed up. They said that they don't know what our hero's motives are. However, they are sure that they want to let him achieve his goal. Our hero's brother said that if Kel hadn't crossed the line, they wouldn't have done that. After which, he waved his weapon and said that there was no place here for such a scumbag as Kel. He plunged his weapon into our hero's body, after which the sister rushed into the attack and declared that even regeneration would not help our hero if you cut off the head. Immediately after these words, she cut off the head of our hero, and the brother and sister laughed disgustingly. Kel was incredibly shocked by what just happened. He wondered, is this the end? Kel fell from the top of the castle, his head severed. The sister said that it was high time to cut his head off. Pavel said that it was time for them to go help their father. Suddenly, the sister abruptly pulled out a blade and thrust it into her brother's shoulder. She jumped up and said that he probably knew that it would happen anyway. The brother looked at the weapon and said that it was his mother's dagger and that it was forbidden to touch it. However, the sister replied that they were demons and they didn't care, because the weapon was created to be used. After which she pointed at her brother and said that if she killed him, there would be only one child left in the family. And this means that she will become the only heir. Hearing this, the brother immediately rushed into battle and said that he would finish her off. The sister also rushed forward and declared that the end had already been decided when she returned it with this dagger. They entered into a fierce battle. Kel, meanwhile, lay there and thought, "How can you be so bloodthirsty?" After which he closed his eyes and thought that this is exactly how he imagined these demons to be. But suddenly a servant appeared and grabbed the head and body of our hero. Shaking with fear, she put her head back and hugged the master. Meanwhile, the demons were advancing on the heavens. However, the guilds fought back successfully. In short, I was inside this whole hell at the time. And when he noticed the huge dragon, he thought that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He suddenly jumped onto the dragon's head. He grabbed it and tore it off with ease. The general was furious when his pet was killed, after which he ordered all his men to attack at full power. There was an explosion, and when the dust settled, he already thought that they had succeeded. But in front of them, they saw the Demon King in his true form. The general shouted that the demons had transformed just like in the books, and the squad leader declared that this was the final form of the Demon King. The people's bodies shook with fear. The girl ordered everyone not to let fear take hold of them. Even the general couldn't stop the trembling throughout his body, so it was no wonder that the others were paralyzed with fear. The Demon King stood and thought about the fact that the only downside to his son's plan was that even if they could instantly transfer forces to the center of the heavenly base, it won't be so easy to go back. He knew very well that Kel had made a mistake here, but he didn't bring it up. It was not fitting for the Demon King to worry about some kind of exit. The Demon King also thought that perhaps Kel also took this into account. After that, he smiled when he looked at his opponents and thought that something completely different was important now. It's time to send our heavenly comrades to their forefathers. The general immediately understood why everything was going wrong and shouted that, in short, the demons were going to use the full potential of the final form. He rushed into the attack, shouting that they must risk their lives to stop this attack. But it was too late. A huge lilac explosion happened. The sounds even reached the maid who was now sitting and hugging her master's body. She stroked his head and begged him to rise again. She remembered the old days when Kel ordered her to cut off his hand, in order to put it back and check whether it will grow together or not. And to my surprise, it all worked out, and quite quickly too. Kel looked at his maid and said that the head would be next. The maid looked at him in fear. However, he explained that he had to make sure that it would work with his head too. Kel said that with her, it is of course dangerous. So it is better not to rush and ordered to do it very carefully. And to his surprise, it worked again. Kel straightened his clothes and said that that was enough of the experiments. All this happened a few days ago. After all the experiments, Kel ordered to go to the servant of Celdera and tell her what he told her and try to behave naturally. Our hero's maid came to Caldera's maid and announced that Kel was going to kill the young mistress during the battle. She said that Kel intended to do this while the Demon King was fighting the heavens. Because of this, another maid declared that Kel was a scoundrel who was going to plot evil against the mistress. The maid smiled and added that Her Highness would have the perfect opportunity to cut off his head, and it would definitely work, even despite his incredible regenerative abilities. Now the maid remembered all this and thought that everything was exactly in accordance with our hero's fucking plan. She screamed that there would be no point in this if Kel died now. Suddenly, Kel came to his senses and asked why she was so nervous. Kel slowly rebuilt his body and reasoned that the rate of regeneration slows down if he is wounded by a blade filled with energy. After that, his father straightened his clothes and said that his brothers and sister were unlucky because he still survived, which means his plan is still working. The maid immediately rushed to hug her master and scream that she thought he had already died. All this made Kel even blush a little and feel embarrassed. Kel pushed her away from him and said that if he was there was no time to mess around. After this, Kel used a spell and announced that he was breaking the contract between him and the maid Rin, granting her freedom. The maid was deeply shocked. Kel turned away and said that there was no longer any contract between them, after which he added with a smile that now she can live her best life. Rin watched him go, deeply admiring his actions. She remembered their first meetings, when Kel said that she could be his friend and not his servant. After all this and what she did, the girl cried. She rushed to our hero and asked him to take her with him. Kel immediately replied that he did not need it. However, she still begged to take her with him, despite the fact that Kel replied that she would only get in his way. Meanwhile, the Demon King continued to fight his enemies. Squad Talon tried to understand how he managed to stand on his feet with such serious injuries, and they thought that before them was a truly great Demon King. The generals were now thinking that it was humiliating to admit this, but they could not defeat him. No matter what kind of creature he is, no one can stop this evil. The Demon King meanwhile looked around and thought that the enemy army had already been destroyed. Just like his soldiers, the man examined his wounds, and he assumed that his children wouldn't come either. With a little bitterness, he closed his eyes, after which he immediately opened them, in complete confidence that from the very beginning this was only his battle. The Demon King had almost no energy left, so he decided to put an end to everything here. Meanwhile, Kel ran through the secret passages and finally found the exit. Through it, he can escape from the castle, which means that just a little bit more is left and he will be free. Suddenly, the maid asked him to stop and ran forward. She used a protective barrier against strange energy. Kel loudly asked what it was. She replied that she had already smelled a strange smell of blood here. Out of nowhere, the wizards of heaven appeared and said that the Demon King was trying to remain a good daddy to the last, saving his children. They approached our heroes and said that they knew that it was not in vain that they had been waiting here throughout the battle. Kel instantly realized that his plan was on the verge of failure because the heavens had placed a shortcut to the secret passage. And this means that they are watching their every step. Meanwhile, one of the wizards said that no one from the royal family of demons should remain alive. They threw all their forces against our hero. The girl, meanwhile, held back this energy and shouted that she would hold them back while the young master ran away. What did Kel answer that she couldn't do anything alone? The girl, meanwhile, held the barrier and shouted that she was a servant and her main goal was to protect him. However, Kel knew very well that she was only capable of the simplest defensive magic, and there was no point in even talking about combat spells. And now, she is ready to sacrifice her own life for the sake of her master. The maid noticed that Kel was standing still and shouted at him to get out of here quickly. Suddenly, Kel put his hand on her shoulder and called her by name, after which he immediately threw her aside with the words that she didn't dare pretend to be a strong woman. Kel looked her in the eyes and said that if she was going to follow him, she needed to at least not die in front of him and not awaken the beast in him. Meanwhile, the wizards were shouting that they had no way out and that they would die now. They said that against our hero, the weakest in the castle, Even middle-class magic would be enough. However, Kel knew very well that the former owner of this body had always been shy and suppressed his strength and never demonstrated his true abilities. Which means that everything these idiots knew about the royal family was a complete lie. Kel easily repelled their attacks. The maid looked at this and wondered where the young master got so much strength from. The wizards shouted that it was simply impossible, because according to their report, Kel was the lowest ranking. However, it was too late. Kel fought them with incredible ease. Grabbing one of them by the head, he asked, "Who is the low-ranking one here now?" The maid looked at all this and thought that this simply couldn't be. Kel had just defeated the heavenly mage. The rest said that this was just some kind of nonsense, because Kel was supposed to be a spineless weakling. Kel looked at them and said that they probably had a bad informant. The wizards immediately gathered to confront our hero and cast a light spell. To do this, they will need to put all their energy into the strike. However, they understood that if they failed, then it would definitely be the end for them. When the maid realized what was going on, she immediately rushed forward to save her master. But it was too late. The spell worked. The maid also got some of it. Kel tried to understand what was happening and why he couldn't move at all. The maid looked into her master's eyes and apologized for not being able to protect him. Meanwhile, the wizards were happy that everything turned out just perfect for them. One of them took out a blade and said that our hero had come to an end only because suddenly another one stopped him and said that after so much effort they deserved a little reward. He approached the maid and said that he wouldn't mind having some fun with this devil. The girl screamed that she knew how they mocked demons, when suddenly he brought his blade to her neck and declared that they would play with her later. Kel looked at all this and thought that in this world, too, people treat others like things. Meanwhile, one of the wizards approached him and declared that he would now kill the offspring of the Demon King. Kel looked at the exit and thought about how close it was. He didn't believe that he would die like this because he almost got out. Meanwhile, the wizard had already swung his sword to deliver the finishing blow. Suddenly, Kel noticed a strange energy, as if something was approaching. The Demon King appeared before our hero. Kel wondered if he had already returned from the battle and if his plan had failed. The Demon King said in a low voice that he had fought countless battles, and before each one, he thought through all the possible options. Kel looked into his father's eyes and asked what they were talking about. The man said that Selder would never take his place because he didn't care about his own kind. Tarmi doesn't have enough ambition to get to the throne. Kel replied that he didn't care about his brothers and sister. He was more interested in how the Demon King got here. The Demon King looked into his son's eyes and said that the Demon King has the ability to pass on his energy to his heir before he dies. The Demon King said in a calm voice that Kel had been doing well lately, and the king saw a worthy candidate for the role of the next king. Kel raised his hands and declared that the Demon King was deeply mistaken and that this should not be done. However, it was too late as the Demon King said that he was transferring all the energy remaining in his body to his son. Kel continued to beg him not to do this, but his father would not listen. Closing his eyes, the Demon King thought that he didn't want his children to mourn his death. He wanted them to be real demons. The Demon King was killed at sunset. The survivors of the elite squad were able to finish what they started. General Killman sacrificed himself for the sake of victory. The survivors could not believe that the Demon King had actually died. They looked at the severed head of the Demon King and shouted loudly. The people were happy that they were able to defeat the Demon King. But at that very moment, deep underground, a new Demon King appeared. The maid was surprised to see that the young master's energy had dispersed the Spear of Light. The other wizards tried to understand why his energy had increased so quickly and what was going on here. Kel looked at his body with a smile. Only one thought was spinning in his head. The Demon King was dead. Kel adjusted his tie, thinking that everything had gone according to plan. Meanwhile, the wizards were saying that their energy was running out and they needed to get out of here as quickly as possible. Kel asked the maid to stand still and went towards them. Kel looked at them. He felt inside himself, an endless void of darkness. That's what power he received. With one movement, he threw back two wizards, after which he looked at them arrogantly. Kel thought that his strength was now simply incredible. However, it was putting too much pressure on his body, and apparently his body was not yet ready to accept it completely. Having finished with these wizards, Kel went forward. Finally, he thanked the Demon King, because thanks to him he was able to get out of the castle. Kel finally found himself in the middle of an endless green meadow. He took a deep breath of that taste of freedom. Now he can go wherever he wants, which made him infinitely happy. After all, now Kel can live as he wants. When suddenly his body was enveloped in a blue glow, Kel asked what it was in a nervous voice, and the maid immediately replied that it meant the teleportation spell had worked. Kel reached out his hand to grab the maid. And the teleportation spell worked. They found themselves in a new place. Kel looked around and asked where they were. The maid, meanwhile, was incredibly surprised. She said that she didn't even know that Kel could use teleportation magic. Kel looked at her and said that it wasn't him, after which he added that it seemed like it was an emergency spell that their father cast on them in the event of his death. The maid looked at her body and said how much to her surprise all the wounds had healed. Kel looked around and said that he thought they had been in the teleportation tunnel for about 3 days. Kel also said that he was sure that his father did this on purpose to give them time to recover. Kel thought that the Demon King was a real father if he cast such a curse on his children. They went forward. On the way, the maid asked if the demons had really died, to which Kel replied that she thought correctly. But Kel was not sad, because everything turned out just as he planned. The maid asked our hero to stop and stated that he must now become the next Demon King. Kel looked at her and asked why he would do that. The girl said that she noticed how much Kel had changed, and realized something. It was Kel who was worthy of becoming the true Demon King, after which she placed her hand on her heart and declared that she would serve her master until he ascended the throne. Kel looked at her and thought that she had definitely misunderstood something. However, Kel decided that he didn't have enough strength for that right now and said that she could do whatever she wanted. Suddenly, the girl took our hero by the hand. She looked ahead and said that she knew perfectly well where they were now. This land of magic, Arsel, where every 10th inhabitant is raised for the sole purpose of destroying demons. There was an incredible celebration here now. Posters were hanging everywhere saying that the Demon King had fallen. Kel tried to understand why he was teleported here. After all, who knows what will happen to them if they discover that they are demons? The maid immediately changed her appearance and said that it was better to use transformation magic before they were noticed. Kel agreed with her and began to look like an ordinary person. He looked at the girl as they entered the city and asked her to tell him everything she knew about this place. She explained that it was a small island state located on the eastern border of Talui. Blessed fortresses there by the name of Watergore dwelling in the nearby seas, its inhabitants were given the opportunity to develop magical abilities in you, which led to the emergence of powerful magicians. They have been at odds with the demons for a very long time, just like other countries under Talui's control. After listening to all this, Kel said that he understood how everything was arranged here. However, he asked why his father sent him to such a dangerous place. The maid said that if Kel was aware of the danger, then why was he walking around the capital? Because he wanted to escape as quickly as possible. Kel replied that the escape required preparation, so they could not rush. But the hero looked ahead and thought that, in order to fulfill his dreams in this world, it is very important to master magic. Literally everything about this city is based on her, and this is a great reason to get it. After all, here, magic is used even in architecture, and some of the buildings, thanks to its power, even fly. I looked at all this and thought that if he knows magic, he will create many more buildings than in the game. Suddenly, Kel heard the maid's stomach gurgling. Kel looked back and said he wanted a snack too. They bought some strange pie, and the girl explained that it was the most delicious dish on the magical island. When she sang it, she immediately asked to take another one. They tried a lot of things. Kel was surprised how much she could fit in it. As they sang this, she again said that she wanted to try something else, which made Kel start to think that maybe he should leave her there. When they passed by one place, the girl immediately suggested looking into a magic tavern. However, Kel asked her to hold her horses. And it was in this very tone that they were now celebrating the victory over the Demon King. It just so happened that Kel and his maid were also sent here to celebrate. Kel was already quite drunk and thought that taking a rest was a good idea. Suddenly, Commander Cirrus noticed something interesting. With a strange smile, she looked at our hero and his maid and said that they had a very interesting couple here. After some time, Kel got completely drunk, went outside and threw up. The maid said that she understood that too much had happened. However, why did he have to drink so much? She also added that, on top of everything else, this feast was held in honor of the death of the Demon King. Kel looked at her angrily and reminded her that it was she who offered him a drink. Suddenly, they saw people running around. Kel was surprised and asked what happened, and the maid replied that she simply couldn't believe it, because until now, the hunt for the Demon King was the only S-level wanted list. And today another one appeared. She immediately grabbed our hero by the clothes and went to check what had happened. They went to the main building where the portrait of our hero, S-level, hung. People were discussing how surprised they were that the Demon King's offspring were still alive. After all, they thought that they were all finished, and Kel and the maid also couldn't believe what they were seeing. Kel asked loudly, why was he wanted? The maid immediately shut his mouth and said that the guy was simply very drunk. The others were surprised and asked questions. Isn't Kel the weakest among the Demon King's children? Because of this, they thought that they would cope quite easily and quickly. They also discussed how he was so weak that the building was more suited to a sea level, and were firmly convinced that all the hunters would be on the lookout for his head. Kel looked at all this and thought that it would be better for him to lie low for a while. He instantly sobered up and said that it was time for them to go. After 10 meters, she asked him how he should now call the gentleman in public. The hero replied that she could simply address him as Jack. The maid looked at her master in surprise and asked how he even came up with this idea. Kel replied that he didn't want to listen to unnecessary questions. They went even further, and along the way the maid said that they had big problems because she did not expect that people would find out so quickly that Kel was still alive. Kel replied that they needed to finish their business as quickly as possible and get out of here. Suddenly, Commander Cirrus met them. The girl had drunk a lot and asked, "Is it really true that another top-level wanted person has appeared?" Kel looked at her and said that it was so. The girl smiled and added that she also wanted to go and see. Kel remembered that in the tavern people called her the Hope of Arsel, and she was clearly not an ordinary citizen. The girl drank some more beer and said that it was sad to hear that the Demon King's son was still alive. Kel smiled and said that this guy seemed weak, so it clearly wouldn't last long. The maid also added that they would deal with him quickly. Ceres hugged the two of them sharply and asked if the boys really thought that way despite the fact that he was the son of the bastard Hell. After that, she looked at the two of them and said that she had noticed in the tavern that the guys smelled very strange. Kel and the maid realized that she had clearly figured them out. However, the girl smiled, pressed her to you, and said that she saw in front of her on the journeys that had not taken a bath for a long time, after which she said that they could drop in to see her and continue drinking. Kel thought that luckily they had escaped, and they all went to her house together. There Kel was finally able to take a bath. There were also delicious teas and sweets that he had never tried before. Kel looked at this and wondered if these were made with magic too. Here, some man looked up and began to think about how he always wanted to live in the game world and now his dreams seemed to be real. Meanwhile, our hero's maid tried to restrain herself as much as possible, because if she got caught, it would be the end of them. Meanwhile, Cirrus was lying next to her and talking about how awesome it was to take a bath together, after which she looked into the maid's eyes and asked why the girl was so tense, because she was behaving like a captured devil. After these words, the redhead used magic and said that this aroma would help to relax a little. The girl realized that in front of her was a sacred element, the worst aroma for demons that sucks out their Mazda. As soon as she noticed this, her spell also began. The girl fought with all her might and begged the young master to save her. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in the bathroom and sipped tea with something sweet. Ceres moved a little and said that she thought that everything would end after the death of the Demon King. All her suffering. The girl, meanwhile, was thinking that she didn't care at all about her suffering and she just wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible. Ceres moved a little closer and said that from birth, she was destined to become a magician. And finally, Rin couldn't stand it any longer and ran out of the bathroom saying that she urgently needed something. Ceres smiled and noted that she didn't seem to like the sacred scent. In the hallway, Kel met his maid and said that the hot bath was the right thing to do, and he enjoyed it immensely. However, Rin replied that now was not the time to discuss baths. She screamed loudly that her transformation magic almost dissipated. Kel asked why, and then the girl explained that the redhead used a sacred scent, and demons lose their energy if it is manifested by an advanced magician. Kel thought for a moment and said that in that case, things could really end badly. After that, Kel turned around and said that he would go take a bath and only once more, and then they would get out of there. However, the maid immediately stopped him and said that they needed to leave right now. Ceres saw something appear in front of them and said that no one would leave here. Again, they agreed to let in more glasses. Ka smiled and said that they really did say that, but it was really time for them to leave. The girl created a blue ball and asked, "Aren't they interested in trying drinks and food created by magic?" When Kel looked at this, he suddenly became serious, after which he approached her and said that, in principle, it was possible to drink some more. Outside the house, meanwhile, a squad of warriors had gathered to finish off the child of the Demon King who was in this house. They thought that there would be no more such chances. I must get rid of him at any cost. And inside, Kel and his maid were trying all sorts of delicious things. She suggested she try something stronger and immediately added that it was all made here on the basis of holy water. As soon as Kel drank it, he thought that everything inside him was on fire. You might as well bring a fire extinguisher. And he also thought with sadness that in vain he had fallen for culinary magic. The girl looked at these guys and said that they could talk about something. After a short pause, she began to talk about how in order to kill the Demon King, she joined the Talcon Squad and trained all her life, risking her life. She lifted her shirt and said that she got this huge chance during the exam. The maid replied that she didn't even notice him. Afterwards, Sirius pulled her hair back and showed another scar. She said with a smile that she was missing one eye. After which she added that she hides her scars with the help of magic, because every time she sees them for more than a day, they catch up with her again. She lost your eye during the exam. The commander shouted that no pain should stop them because they were created for one single purpose, to finish off the Demon King. The girl has been saying since childhood that she was born to kill the Demon King. Ceres smiled and continued to talk about how she had spent her entire life trying to finish him off and had earned herself many scars. After that, she suddenly stood up, came close to our hero and ran her hand over his face, asking what they had been doing all this time. She lifted his clothes and said that he must have similar scars too. However, there was nothing there. The girl smiled, looked into his eyes and said that he had surprisingly very smooth skin and not a single scar. Kel understood why everything was going well, because her touches dispelled the magic. The girl leaned over the spirit of our hero and asked, "Is he really a demon?" Suddenly, Kel realized that she had known all this time who was standing in front of her. A few seconds later, a squad of wizards burst into the room. Ceres and the others looked at them in surprise. Kel and the maid realized with a start that she had led them into her trap. The girl smiled in the meantime and said that it was great that everything was assembled. However, the squad leader stated that the message from heaven was correct. She really did have no eye, and she was hiding it. And at the same time, she hid her demonic essence, the commander shouted. The man pointed his weapon at her and declared that Ceres, the demon who had invaded Arsal, was the one. Kel and the maid immediately stood up. They couldn't believe what they had just heard. The girl immediately called her weapon and said that they were right, because she no longer had a reason to hide. After which, she added that this is precisely why she leaked information about being a demon. The wizard said that she confessed, so they no longer had any doubts, and they threw themselves in order to seize her. However, the girl pointed her weapon at them with a smile and declared that she was an elite magician of Tolkien, and clearly no match for some sorcerer of Arsal. Kel looked at all this and thought that things were clearly going badly. And then there were several big explosions. The maid couldn't believe that she had such powerful magic. Kel looked at all this in surprise and asked, "Did she really just protect them?" Ceres said that she knows very well that our heroes are also demons and that there is no point in trying to hide it with her. She looked into our hero's eyes and declared that she was the daughter of the Demon King. Kel and the maid froze in place from shock. The girl smiled and said that since they had little time, it would be better to show their memories using memory transfer magic. Once upon a time, a king conducted an experiment and one of them was successful. They have me, who is able to open the horns and demonic energy without any problems. The girl looked at her father and thought that he was the true Demon King. In short, the demon said that since his blood flows through hers, Ceres is his daughter. However, from birth, Ceres was an ordinary lab rat. Every day was a real hell for her. Horrible experiments were performed on them, and the only thing she could do was endure it. Finally, the day came when she found herself the only survivor out of all her peers. The girl decided that the same fate would clearly befall her. But now she is told that she is the daughter of the Demon King. The girl smiled and said that for her, this was a great part. That day, the Demon King gave her a name and said that she would infiltrate the ranks of heaven and deliver information to him. For the sake of her king, she was ready to do anything. Teleported to this city, several men found a small child and thought that he was attacked by demons. They picked him up and decided to take him to the infirmary immediately. From that moment on, she became a spy and the Demon King. Gradually, she came to Talu as the magician Arsola, enduring all the trials that she encountered along the way. And then, after passing, she joined Talui, and finally rose to the level of one of the strongest in the elite Tolkien squad. After 15 years, she was able to meet her father again. I wanted to rush to him to hug him, but I couldn't. After all, it was necessary to wait until everyone except Kilman died. After all, her role was to secretly use magic to weaken Tolkien's squad, and helping my father kill General Kilman. Ceres thought that once this detachment was defeated, she would finally be able to return to the castle with her father. She wanted a new life where she would always be by his side as his daughter. However, the battle went a little off track. An exhausted Kilman looked at the Demon King and said that he had exceeded all expectations. Kilman acknowledged the Demon King as the strongest of all his opponents. The Demon King replied that he did not need the recognition of a pathetic man. Kilman smiled, saying that the king was not a man of modesty, after which he said that it was time to end this. The spell rose high into the sky. Kilman shouted that this was his last attack, into which he would put all of himself. Seeing this, the Demon King did exactly the same. Then, Cirrus realized that the Demon King would die today. However, it was too late. She could do nothing. At that moment, Cirrus heard his voice. The Demon King called her his daughter and gave her his final order, to serve the next Demon King as she served him, and to protect him until the very end. Cirrus burst into tears. When the collapse ended, she saw her father's head. Ceres wished that it was just a dream. However, the reality turned out to be much more cruel. Having witnessed the death of her father, she had to return to Talu as reinforcements arrived. There, people celebrated that they were finally able to defeat the Demon King. After all, they had been waiting for this event for thousands of years. And Cirrus decided to leave her post and return to Arsal, her second home, where she once carried out her father's first assignment. Here she decided to start from scratch, but only to avenge the death of his father. With her arms outstretched, Cirrus loudly declared that she planned to destroy everyone, starting with Arsal. The maid, meanwhile, could not believe that she saw another daughter of the Demon King in front of her, that he had just gotten rid of his crazy relatives when suddenly another one appeared. And even though they weren't purebred, he didn't expect to meet another sister of his here. The girl said with a smile that she would not force our heroes to join her. However, she would say something. Being the magical side, Arsal is the main threat to all demons. And that means the longer they allow him to exist, the sooner Kel, the demon's last hope, will die. Kel was surprised. He didn't expect that she figured out even that he was the son of the Demon King. However, he clenched his fist, thinking that even in games, magic was one of the main forces in battle. And if they are not dealt with, then Kel finds himself in great danger along with the rest of the demons. Meanwhile, the wizards came here and said that they had probably already sent reinforcements here after hearing this explosion, so they couldn't let others take Ceres. They prepared to use the maximum of their energy for the next attack. Kel took off his disguise. He looked at the people and called them freaks who considered them their own but still attacked without a doubt. Kel stepped forward and said it was just self-defense. Ceres looked at him in surprise, and I noticed something strange. She felt his energy, which was the same as her father's. That night, they fought with the people for a long time. It must have looked like a massacre to the maid's eyes. For Ceres, Arsal was a second home, so she knew every corner. She destroyed all the major government buildings, including the Magic Academy. Kel used the Demon King's magic to subdue those who, intoxicated with victory, imagined themselves to be all-powerful. Thanks to this teamwork, the land of magic, Arsal was easily crushed. The entire city was engulfed in flames. Even the sky was painted with its scarlet tongues. At the end, one of the wizards said that he simply could not believe that this city could fall so quickly. Wounded, he screamed that he would never forgive the demons for this. But at that very second, Cirrus erased it. And she said that in fact she will not forgive Arsal. Looking at the burning city, she said that she would destroy every single city. Kel was surprised when he heard her ambitions. After that, he turned around and said that they had helped each other enough, and it was time to go their separate ways. However, Cirrus stopped him and said that she recognized his energy. Kel looked at her, thinking that there was no point in hiding anymore, and he confessed that the Demon King had transferred his energy to him. As soon as he said this, Cirrus was seriously surprised. And then Kel realized that he had calculated everything because she was not sure about it. The girl took a step forward, saying that he had some doubts, after which she revealed that she is not the purebred daughter of the Demon King, but rather a mutant created with the help of his blood aura, so she 100% recognizes our hero as his true successor. Keeping her hand on her heart, the girl said that she was created after the birth of our hero. She smiled and said that this means that your hero is her older brother. After that, she offered to join her, because Kel also wants to avenge his father's death. Kel looked at this with the thought that he did not run away from home for the sake of revenge. Suddenly, Cirrus realized. She looked straight into his eyes and asked, "Is Kel really going to run away?" Her gaze changed. She said that Kel was the last heir to the throne, the only surviving child. The maid quietly whispered that they had to go with her, because otherwise she would finish them off. Kel realized he had no choice and said that of course he wanted revenge. Ceres smiled and said that in that case they could go together because it was time to burn them all to the ground. Kel looked at her back and thought that in any case he needed to study Arsal's magic, and Cirrus knew everything about it. So now our heroes decided to drag out time under the guise of revenge. He decided to treat her as one of his own. One of the surviving wizards, meanwhile, was hiding and thinking that he should report this to Talu. A few days later, an urgent message was brought to the main castle from an unknown person from Arsal. The king asked what happened. And then the servant reported to him that Cirrus turned out to be a demon, so the magicians of Arsel tried to eliminate her. But suddenly, Kel appeared, and together they burned the city to the ground. The man couldn't believe that the son of the Demon King was able to enter this city. The servant suggested that Kel was somehow connected to Cirrus. The king was incredibly angry. He said that not only did this turn out to be a demon, but also, together with our hero, she raised Asol to the ground. And if this information reaches the wrong ears, there will be trouble and the kingdom will be made a laughingstock. The king gave the order to kill Cirrus and Kel before people knew about it. And if their heads were not brought to him, the bitch would say goodbye to her position. An old man named Hayden swore on his own name that he would kill them, after which he turned around and slowly approached the head of the Demon King. He looked into his eyes and thought about how, besides demons, even after his death he haunts people. The man swore that he would destroy all his relatives. Afterwards, Hayden went to another man and asked why there was still no news from Killian's squad. He was told that the general should just receive a message because they trusted him to return immediately. In the entire kingdom, this guy Killian is the best knight, surpassing even Killman. And Korolev needed him here in order to kill these little animals. Now the young man was training. He was informed of the news that General Killman, his blood brother, sacrificed his life to defeat the Demon King, after which the servant said that the castle needed Killian to catch our hero. However, the guy replied that he didn't give a damn what Talua wanted because the demons killed his brother. He looked at the servants with a serious face and said that now he would destroy every demonic creature on the continent, starting with the Demon King's son. Our heroes, meanwhile, made a halt. Kel looked at what was in front of him and asked if there was too much meat for 3 mouths. Cirrus answered that Kel could not eat if she did not want to, and for her, it was just a snack. The maid asked how Cirrus didn't gain weight, to which the girl replied that it was difficult to gain weight if all of it quickly left the body. The maid immediately thought that this was simply a wonderful theory. Kel, meanwhile, thanked the gods that his new sister wasn't trying to kill him like the rest of his siblings. He also tried to figure out if she was jealous of him being directly related to the Demon King. Kel decided to ask her directly and asked if she felt any dislike towards him because he was the biological son of the king. Ceres immediately replied that she would kill our hero. However, she immediately calmed down and said that our hero has a little bit of the blood of the one she always loved and respected, so she cannot hate Kel. And what's more, if Kel is his direct heir, then she is obliged to protect him with all her might. Kel was surprised to hear that, unlike the others, she was going to protect him. The girl smiled and said that from now on she would dedicate her life to protecting our hero. Kel was a little embarrassed, but thanked her for her words. Rin, meanwhile, was trying to figure out why Kel was blushing. She decided to draw attention to herself and asked the gentleman to eat another leg, because he had spent a lot of energy and needed to recharge. Kel said that he didn't want to, and then the maid stood up and said that she would take care of him until she died. Kel looked at her in surprise and said that he understood everything and also asked her to calm down. Ceres looked up and said that other countries had probably already found out about the situation in the magical city. So a bunch of demon hunters would soon come here. This means that it is not safe here, and you need to find another place to spend the night. Kel looked up and said that this place was actually perfect. After that, he looked at the girls and said that they just needed to put in a little effort and they could easily create an impregnable secret fortress. Using materials at hand, they quickly built a fortress. And then when it was time to catch their breath, Kel. And the meaning of everything why they learned during the battle. Having used such a huge amount of energy, our hero needed to gain strength. Even the Demon King needed time to recover after a fight. Ceres, having expended much more energy, needed a longer period of rest than Kel, and so they spent the night peacefully in their fortress. The next morning, Killian arrived in Talua. The man looked at the guy and said that just looking at him gave him goosebumps. One of the squad members said that it seemed to him that the general had become several times stronger in a short period of time. After which the guy immediately added that his brother would be happy if he were here now. The elf behind him asked the guy to watch his language. The dark-skinned guy looked at the general and asked if he was sure they should answer the king's call. After all, even Kel's immediate death would not satisfy their anger now. Killian rose into the throne room. He looked at the head of the Demon King, thinking that this creature had killed his brother. The rest of the squad said it was just disgusting. Killian looked at his assistant and asked if the tracking spell would work on just the head, to which she replied that there was a chance. Bloodstains will allow her to track down those who have the same blood flowing in their veins. Hearing this news, the guy smiled and said that the main show would begin very soon. Ceres meanwhile stood up, said that they had rested enough, and added that it was time to deal with the bastards, because Tolkien's second platoon would soon be called up. The maid was surprised when she heard this. Ceres continued to talk about how, in fact, the castle did not believe that the first input would be able to kill the Demon King. In essence, they were used as an experiment, and all in whom the castle invested all its strength and resources was the second platoon, the White Talcon, General Killman's younger brother's elite platoon of true fighting geniuses. Kel looked at Ceres and asked, "Is Killman, who killed the Demon King, weaker than them?" Ceres clenched her fist, said that she didn't want to admit it, but yes, they are much stronger than Killman, and it's hard to even imagine how much. Rin asked with frightened eyes, "How will they be able to invade Talu then?" Ceres immediately replied that the members of the White Talcon were busy training in isolation, and it would take some time to gather them all together. Therefore, it was necessary to destroy Talu as soon as possible. Kel immediately thought that Talu was bigger than Arcel, and simple luck would not help win the fight. Kel looked at Ceres and said that he was wanted, so he thought they had probably already been called. Kel threw up his hands and said that the three of them, without help, would never be able to overcome the forces of Talui, so it was necessary to form an army and build a base. Our hero's eyes lit up and he declared that they would create the strongest dungeon. They looked at him in surprise, and Kel continued to talk about how they shouldn't rush into a duel if they are not sure of victory. Otherwise, they will suffer the fate of the Demon King. Kel looked at his hands and said that therefore they would build the strongest dungeon of all time and declare war on Talui. Ceres smiled and said that she expected no less from the son of the Demon King. Kel was delighted because he was making up this speech as he went along. Ceres immediately said with a smile that it was time to gather an army, and also added that she knew guys who could be recruited. The girls were happy and shouted loudly that it was time to prepare for war. Kel looked at all this and thought that they probably really liked his idea. Kel looked down and thought with a smile that in this way he could gain time to create his own world, and no one would stop him. A map that he could never bring to reality, Utopia. Kel looked at his sister and asked if she knew any reliable demons, to which she immediately replied that she knew a few. Kel stated that they first needed someone with a good understanding of geography and terrain. The girl thought for a bit, but immediately replied that she knew one such person, so it was time for them to hit the road. On the way to his destination, Kel began to study Arcel's magic. Of course, it is impossible to learn this in a short period of time. But thanks to the blood of the Demon King, Kel began to quickly master this magic. He thought about what he was learning and creating magic with his own hands, and he felt that he was getting closer and closer to his goal. It's been 4 days since that moment. Ceres said that they were almost there. Rin looked around and said that it was somehow too deserted here. Ceres replied that it wasn't like that until Talcon set up the ambush. When suddenly the atmosphere around changed, the girl asked everyone not to move, no matter what happened. A demon appeared out of nowhere, pounced on Ceres, and pierced her with a spear. The girl looked down at him and said that she knew that the demon still didn't know what happened. Rin immediately started asking why Ceres took that hit. However, Kel raised his hand and asked her to shut up. He also added that his sister knows what she's doing. The demon began to beat Ceres, and along the way asked why she did not fight back. Didn't she see them as worthy opponents? Ceres obediently knelt down and asked for forgiveness. She said that they could take out their anger on her until they felt better. The demon looked at her in surprise and declared that such a pose was known only to their kind. The girl looked up and said that she was apologizing on behalf of her fellow man. Everyone around was incredibly surprised. They asked if she really was a demon, but then they remembered that last time she came here with soldiers from Talcon. Kel showed his energy and stepped forward. He said that he was the last descendant of the demon king Hel Khaldun, and swore on his name that she was telling the truth. The demons noticed his powerful flow of energy and declared that he was definitely the son of the Demon King. They immediately fell to their knees before him, and they said that they welcome His Highness Kela Khaldun. Ceres raised her head and said that as she thought, everyone sees him as the true heir. Kel smiled. Now creating an army would not be difficult. Our hero and his companions were brought to a city where the demons announced that the descendant of the great Demon King had survived. The elder approached our hero and said that if he needed anything, he could simply order it, and everything would be done in the best possible way. Kel looked around and thought about how the architecture here was completely different. There were no outlines of either Arcel or the Demon King's castle. Kel looked around and was amazed. He couldn't believe that it was possible to create such a strong city without magic, exclusively from natural materials. He also thought that the location was also wonderful. Looking at the demons, Kel also thought that he would never have guessed that such a huge city could be hidden underground. Kel looked at his sister and said that she was right. They would definitely need the ingenuity of the earth demons. The girl laughed and said that she was right. She also smiled and said that in addition to them, they would also need the help of one outstanding warrior. Kel asked who it was, and the girl explained that Tolkien discovered this city on his way to the Demon King's castle. By order of General Kilman, the forest surrounding the city was completely burned down, which threatened the existence of the earth demons. But suddenly, while accompanying the children, one of the demons came out and asked how they could kill those who didn't even know how to fight. The man said that he would not hand these children over to be torn apart by barbarians who did not know their place. The squad was surprised when they saw the demon risking their lives to protect the children. Kilman looked him in the eye and asked what the warrior's name was. The demon immediately replied that his name was Douglas, the son of the earth demons. Kilman looked into the eyes of this demon and said that if he had been born a human, everything would have been different. When suddenly he announced that they were stopping their attack and leaving this place to continue their journey to the castle. Douglas couldn't believe he had managed to protect the children. Ceres looked at him with a smile and said that his courage had saved him all this time. Douglas remained to watch as Tolkien's squad moved into the distance. Ceres looked into the eyes of the Demon King's son with a smile and said that this guy was not a coward and protected the children until the very end. The maid thought for a bit and said that even his name sounded very cool. Kel thought that an earth demon who understood battles was even beyond his expectations. After that, Kel stood up and said that he wanted to meet with this Douglas. The elder immediately replied that this guy was a little stubborn, and, a little embarrassed, he asked to look for someone else. Kel looked into the elder's eyes and said that Douglas would go with them. The elder explained where this guy was, and then Kel went to him, but it turned out that he refused to obey. Douglas said that even though Kel is the son of the great Demon King, he is not obligated to obediently follow him. Kel looked at him and asked what would happen if he used force, to which Douglas replied that in that case he would die in battle. Kel was silent for a few seconds and asked why Douglas wanted to stay here so much, to which the guy replied that he was born and raised here, and this means that he has a duty to defend the motherland, so he will not go anywhere. Kel thought for a moment and noticed that this guy was indeed very stubborn. As Kel suddenly remembered, if he thinks that in the game he also somehow tried to get an orc like Douglas. Kel exhaled heavily and thought that if he couldn't be forced even by force, then there was nothing that could be done. Kel went outside, looked around the city, and thought that the architecture here was truly amazing. He looked around with the thought that he could use some subjects with the knowledge of the Earth Demon. Suddenly, he came across his companions, who were already quite drunk. Kel looked at them and thought that his companions were just alcoholics. However, a few minutes later, Kel, along with them at the bar, also succumbed to alcohol. When the elder saw that the guests were already drunk, he offered to take the guests to the best rooms. Kel slept peacefully in his room that was assigned to him. Meanwhile, a conspiracy was being prepared against him. Approaching his bed, one of the demons swung an axe, after which he struck with all his might, hoping to finish him off with one blow. However, in reality, Kel was not sleeping. He dodged at the last second and said that now everything was clear to him. After that, Kel deftly jumped away from the bed, and the demons rushed like this. They shouted that everyone knows that Kel is a coward, so it's better to just kill him. Kel looked at them calmly. He thought about what he was immediately skeptical about. Moreover, in his forge, Douglas created not weapons but shackles that would not have been suitable for an orc. While Kel was surveying the area, he also noticed that he was being followed. And then Kel decided to take a closer look at everything. And I discovered a barely visible magical barrier behind one of the walls. He was so weak that Kel wouldn't have noticed him if he didn't have the Demon King's energy. However, there was something else strange. Ceres mentioned that Douglas stood up for the children of the Dark Elves. However, Kel did not meet a single cub in the city. And then everything finally made sense. Kel charged at the demons that were attacking him. He overcame them with ease. Tycho said that Douglas didn't tell Kilman that he would protect the children. He only mentioned that he wouldn't give them up. And this means that he didn't care about their protection, he was simply afraid of losing them. Douglas, looking into the eyes of our hero, could not understand why Kel figured it out so quickly. Kel looked him in the eye and said that it was time to remove the magical barrier. Kel walked outside holding Douglas hostage. From their reactions, Kel realized that they all knew the truth. Otherwise, they would not have succeeded. The elder asked, "Did Douglas really fail?" The man apologized and said that he was very sincerely sorry. Kel ordered everyone not to move and said that if he heard even one rustle, he would be finished. All the people began to curse our hero. They slowly approached the wall and Kel ordered the barrier to be removed. Douglas obediently carried out this order, and they saw, behind the barrier, a bunch of dark elf children. There were also adults there. All of them were incredibly scared. Kel was horrified because everything was even worse than he imagined in his head. Our hero's companions ran up to him and said that they had been ambushed while they were sleeping. Suddenly, they froze in place from the shock. They saw all the slaves. Kel looked at Cirrus and asked if she could penetrate the memory of one of the elves and show them. The girl replied that they would not be as clear as her own. However, this is quite possible. Kel closed his eyes and asked her to do it. The girl pointed her staff at one of the elves and Kel merged with him. He saw that this place was pure hell. This guy's mother was forced to get pregnant and give birth, and that's how he came to be. Every life here started the same way. And then, among all the children, the human nobility chose one for themselves and took them, paying huge amounts of money for them. The boy also remembered that the adults who were caught in the outer lands told him what the world outside looked like, and the endless sky and blue oceans, delicious food and carefree travel, about what the children would never have known if they were in this place. And if you had one wish come true before you died, they would ask that their children get out of here and see it all with their own eyes. Seeing all this, Kel turned to the people and shouted loudly that the earth demons were pathetic creatures and finished. He immediately hit Douglas with all his might. Ceres also couldn't believe it. She asked, "Did he really not even try to save the children but just go and give them into slavery?" Douglas barely came to his senses, raised his head and said that it was true. Dark elves are a rare species and a tasty morsel for humans. And besides, they are loved by nature itself, and thanks to the fact that the earth demons sell them, they can survive in this world. The man looked into our hero's eyes and asked, "Isn't that enough to breed them like cattle?" Ceres looked at him with hatred and called him a bastard, after which she asked how dare he enslave his own race. Douglas shouted that now that the Demon King was dead, the dark elves were needed to survive. Kel looked into his eyes and thought about how he considered himself unhappy when his dad beat him. However, these children live in beech trees that are incomparable to anything. Kel was determined that he was not going to stand by while this unfolded before his eyes. Kel looked at his companions and said that they must complete Kilman's unfinished business. Ceres immediately agreed. She stated that she would not forgive them, because for this they betrayed their own kind. Kel prepared to ask for an attack and announced that this would be the last day of Earthen City. Douglas slowly stood up and ordered everyone to fight back, since there were only 3 attackers. The massacre began. Douglas shouted that under no circumstances should they retreat. Because of the 3, Kel was the weakest, so they should not obey him. Rin fought back along with the others and talked about how the young master would become the next Demon King. Douglas, meanwhile, rushed to attack, but Kel easily grabbed his arm. Kel thought that this was real life and not a game. And if there was anything in his power that could help him change this world, then he would use it and would not sit idly by as before. The Dark Elves watched as 3 heroes rescued them from slavery. One of the girls asked, "Are they really doing this for them?" One man slowly stood up and said that they should help those who were saving them. His sister immediately began to stop her brother and say that it was dangerous to go there. She screamed that if they were defeated, they would be mocked again. Others also said that he should sit still. Hearing this, the guy stopped. He remembered all the bullying he had endured. At these memories, he hunched over and clutched his head. Kel took notice of this and said that soon this scream of pain would flow from Douglas's throat. Suddenly, the demon took something out of his pocket and ate it. He ordered everyone to swallow the earthen ore, because if they lose, they will lose everything. All the other demons immediately took it out of their pockets and ate it. The maid immediately screamed that she thought that the earth ore was just a myth. Kel looked at her and shouted, "What is this?" Ceres screamed loudly. She explained that earth ore is an artifact that the orc sacrifices part of his life when he eats it in order to increase his physical abilities tenfold. Douglas transformed. He became more like the monster and shouted that he would destroy our hero. Kel thought that this was not a good sign, because in addition, demonic energy had increased in them. They were simply physical strength. Kel looked at his hands and thought that unfortunately, he still couldn't use the Demon King's abilities to the maximum. After that, Kel looked forward and saw Douglas's fist approaching him. Suddenly, the roots of a tree burst out of the ground. They completely encircled Douglas's body. The thin, dark elf, trembling with emotion, took a step forward. He said that they would never bully him again. The guy's name was Jack. The other elves were afraid and asked why he went forward. Douglas looked him in the eye and asked how the little bastard dared to stand in his way, after which he added that he would try to do it for the rest of his days. Suddenly, he noticed that Kel was already right in front of him, and was saying that this would never happen again. Douglas looked down and saw that he now had a huge hole in his chest. Kel looked at Jack and said that he definitely liked the guy. Jack stood there amazed at what he had just done. Douglas, meanwhile, was shouting about how he raised Jack, and he dared to betray his father. Breaking free from his shackles, Douglas screamed loudly that he would finish off Jack. Kel couldn't believe that his body had grown once again. But just as Kel thought this, he was immediately sent flying with one powerful blow. Kel hit the wall and wondered if earth magic was really that powerful. Douglas, meanwhile, rushed to attack Jack. He grabbed him by the head sharply, and he shouted that he would now rip off the little head of the worthless dark elf. Kel tried to figure out if this guy was crazy, why he was so obsessed with killing Jack and not fighting the real enemies. For a second, Kel thought that they were too far away and he wouldn't be able to reach them in time, so a long-range attack was needed. As soon as Kel thought about this, the world around him changed. Kel looked around and asked where he was. A strange silhouette appeared in front of him, explaining that they were in the subconscious. Kel looked at him and asked who was in front of him. The dark figure floated a little closer and asked, "Doesn't Kel want to know how to save this guy? Because even though time flows slowly here, you still have to act quickly." Kel looked at the dark silhouette and asked how to do this. "A strange dark silhouette," Kel said with a smile. "They are not yet ready to use all the power that the Demon King gave him. But as his mind and body enter deeper into resonance, he will be able to reveal more and more abilities." Kel ordered him to shut up and asked what to do. The dark silhouette said that there is one way. After that, he said goodbye to our hero. When Kel blinked, he found himself in the real world, and in his hands was the fire arrow of hell, a powerful artifact. Kel immediately raised his bow and fired it. Jack wrapped his body in roots, and the arrow hit its target, causing Douglas to burn alive. Kel looked at it in surprise and thought that he really did it. The monster, meanwhile, tried to extinguish the flames on itself. However, nothing worked for him. Kel looked at his new weapon and wondered what kind of creature was speaking to him in his subconscious. Meanwhile, the maid continued to fight and said that there were too many of them. And Sirius shouted that because of the ceiling, she couldn't use explosion magic. Kel drew his bow and said that he would deal with them himself, after which he fired several arrows at once. Sirius was amazed because the fire arrow was filled with demonic energy, which means that our hero's energy became stronger. Kel, meanwhile, was happy long-range weapons rule. About 40 minutes passed. Our heroes stood in the middle of a dozen corpses and could not believe that they really dealt with an entire city. Sirius held the earth ore in her hands and said that these demons turned out to be much stronger than she expected. The maid added that she didn't even know that they give away part of your life in exchange for power. Kel thought about the need to find out the details and said that the time had come. He looked at the dark elves and declared that they were now completely free. Kel asked them not to fall for such bastards again and to live independently. The dark elves could not believe that they were truly free now. They asked, could they really take their children and leave this damned place? Kel said that it was so, and then they all knelt down and thanked our hero for saving their lives. Ceres took the earth demons into the team. Failed. These freaks deceived her. The maid replied that it was a pity, of course, but nothing could be done about it. Such was fate. Kel looked at Jack and asked if he was from the outside world. The guy raised his head and said that it was so. Kel said that he believed he had no family to stay with. Jack bowed his head and said that was true. Kel stepped forward and offered him to join his team because they needed an earth demon with good local knowledge. Jack looked ahead and said that he was not an earth demon and didn't really understand anything and so on. His hands shook and he said he would be useless. Kel asked him not to worry because Jack is an elf who has been given the love of nature. And besides, Jack proved that he was ready to stand up for himself in the face of danger. Kel extended his hand and said that this was more than enough. Jack doesn't even remember what his parents look like. One day he found himself alone in an unfamiliar area, and then someone suddenly grabbed him and left him to rot in this place. His whole life was a living hell, and he no longer hoped that all this would ever change. With tears in his eyes, Jack looked at our hero and asked, could he really leave here and follow Mr. Kella? Kel looked at him and said that the guy would not be his follower. They will become comrades. Hearing this, Jack's eyes filled with tears. He took our hero by the hand and slowly rose, thanking him for everything. This is how Kel dealt with the earth demons and called the dark elves from captivity. Kel was a little worried about how they would feel in freedom, but they are creatures protected by nature. So wherever they end up, everything will be better than in that nightmare. So the four of them went forward. The maid immediately said that Jack was new, so he would listen to everyone else. Jack immediately agreed. Ceres thought for a moment and said that they now needed to find a river. Jack immediately replied that he felt water in the south direction. The maid shouted loudly that Jack was a good boy and she recognized him. Kel looked at his sister and asked why she needed the river. The girl smiled and said that they wouldn't last long on their feet, so they needed to saddle someone as soon as possible. And the easiest way to find animals is near water. The maid was delighted and suggested catching a dragon. Ceres looked at her and said that this would not happen, and that at least finding a unicorn would already be a success. Kel agreed and said that then they would go in the direction Jack indicated. After some time, they reached the river. A little later, Talcon discovered the Earth Demons. A member of the squad said that only one person from the entire city survived. A little earlier, Talcon made a stop, and one guy asked why the tracking spell wasn't working. The fortune teller said that she did not know. However, several demons were found in different places. Tank immediately looked at her and asked, "Is there really no way to determine which of them is Kel, since it cannot be that so many of the Demon King's offspring remained alive?" The fortune teller replied that it was impossible to determine which of them was Kel. The elf looked at her and asked what they should do now, since there was no time to catch absolutely everyone. The squad leader said that they don't really have any elections, so they will hunt other demons scattered across the continent. The fortune teller said that she can only teleport long distances alone, so she can check the nearest place. The guy with blue hair said that they would settle accounts with her, while they themselves would do the killing, that is, the cleanup. The girl slowly stood up, opened her eyes, and used teleportation. The squad leader said it was time to begin the demon hunt. The girl looked at the only surviving demon and said that they felt the weak energy of the child of the Demon King here. Could it be that he was passing by? The Earth Demon said that it was so, and this freak exterminated their entire tribe. The fortune teller calmly asked where he went next. The demon replied that he did not know where they were going, after which he immediately received an arrow in the forehead. The girl said that there is only one road to hell for the useless, and I decided that I would probably have to go. So I followed the weak energy. Our heroes, meanwhile, reached the river. Kel reasoned that it was amazing that Jack led them straight to the river guided only by smell, despite the fact that it was several days away. Rin immediately shouted that Jack was a newbie and told him not to confess. Kel suddenly stopped and said that they needed to have a snack. After all, they had been without normal food for several days. The maid immediately said that she was excellent at cooking fish and she would handle it in no time. But as soon as she said this, Jack appeared, holding a dozen fish in his hands. Kel immediately asked how he managed to do this. But Jack replied that he changed something in the river flow using the power of nature. Cirrus said that his magic was simply amazing. The maid noticed that she was too useless, raised her hands sharply and said that she would start a fire. But Cirrus got ahead of her. Kel looked at all this and said that magic is really a useful thing. Rin felt unwanted and was not in the best mood. When they finished cooking the locked room, everyone said that it turned out very well and praised Jack for cooking the fish. And he asked if she was really hungry. The girl replied that she didn't want to eat. Ceres smiled and said that in that case she would eat her portion. The girl said that she didn't care. Kel noticed that Rin was sad because she was useless and decided to think of something. He looked up and said that one fish would not be enough and wondered if there was any fruit here. The maid immediately said that she would go get it. Jack quietly said that he could find the fruit faster, but Kel interrupted him and said that Rin could handle it herself. Kel looked at the girl who was already running as fast as she could, screaming that she would bring the juiciest fruits. Ceres sat down next to her brother and said that she was surprised that he was so attentive, saw that she was loaded, and decided to immediately cheer up. Kel turned away and said that he just wanted something sweet. Ceres laughed, looked at Jack and asked if they could find unicorns here, to which he replied that he often met them in childhood. And there is a similar smell here. Kel thought about hoping that there were dragons here after all. Ceres immediately screamed so that she was surprised that Kel was the same as the servant for the fifth and added that there were no dragons here. Rin, meanwhile, was running around looking for fruits. She didn't even pay attention to something. She jumped on the dragon to pick the fruits. She didn't want to let some newbie surpass her. As she picked up the perfect ripe apple, something dawned on her. Directly below her was a huge dragon. The situation was quite acute, but Rin did not lose her head and screamed with all her might from fear. Kel, meanwhile, asked Jack, "Can he really feel the energy of the earth?" The guy replied that he doesn't know how to describe it in words, but he feels the energy of nature at a certain distance. Kel thought, "I wonder if this is similar to how we look at a map in a game." Ceres said with a smile that his ability would be perfect for searching dungeons. However, Jack sadly said that such an ability only works over a short distance, so he doesn't know how much help he can give. Kel looked at him and asked if it was possible to increase the range through training, to which the guy replied that he had heard of one method. Kel immediately asked what this method was. Jack explained that if he absorbed the stone and the clairvoyance of a dragon that had lived for over 1,000 years, he would be able to expand the distance at which one could sense the energy of nature by several hundred times. When Kel heard that they were talking about increasing the ranges several hundred times, He said that it was incredibly cool. However, the sister immediately replied that finding the dragon was not an easy task, and even if they found it, they would definitely not be able to kill it. Kel looked at her in surprise and asked, "Are dragons really such strong creatures?" She replied that this is true. They are essentially at the top of the food chain. And besides, dragons hate demons. And only some people who are naturally gifted with this ability, who possess great strength of will, can tame them. Kel said that it was quite ironic and asked, "Are humans the only ones who can tame a dragon?" The girl said with a smile that she was not going to interfere with the nature of dragons. After that, Kel added that it would be great to get at least one such stone to level up. The girl replied that they would never be able to find the dragons, so it was better not to bother their heads with it. Meanwhile, the maid tried to run away as fast as she could from the evil dragon that was chasing her. She ran to the camp, and then all our heroes were incredibly surprised when they saw that she brought a huge dragon. Kel immediately ordered the others to get up and said that they needed to run away as quickly as possible before he ate them locked up. After that, he added that Cirrus generally said that there were no dragons here. So why is he here? And why is he so huge? The girl replied that she didn't know and that she had never met such dragons in her life. Rin kept screaming, and then Kel ordered them to shut up. After all, he wouldn't leave her alone if she didn't stop drawing attention to herself. The fortune teller heard these cries. She was surprised when she discovered that there was a dragon nearby. After some time, our heroes were able to hide by weaving behind huge stones. When he left, our hero's sister immediately screamed at the maid who went for fruit and brought a dragon. The girl cried and apologized. She begged him to forgive her because she didn't know that he would stumble upon such a creature. Jack thought for a moment and said that the dragon was clearly large and that its size indicated that it had lived for more than 1,000 years. Kel said that it turns out that this is what they need. The fortune teller who was sitting next to our hero added that this means that there must be a clairvoyant stone in it. Kel looked at her and said that they had a great opportunity, after which a strange tension appeared in the air. After a few seconds, Kel asked who she was. Ceres immediately stood up and declared that this was a fortune teller from the White Talkin' Squad. Everyone else immediately stood up and asked, "Have they found them yet?" Kel instantly summoned his bow, and everyone else also prepared to attack the girl. Ceres revealed that the fortune teller was a cold-blooded wizard, notorious for her cruelty. Kel looked at her and thought that he had hoped for a quiet life after escaping from the castle. But he encountered one danger after another, and this time also one of the most powerful magicians. The fortune teller asked everyone to calm down and added that there was no point in them fighting. Kel looked at her in surprise and asked why. The girl said that Tolkien's traitor, Cirrus, must understand perfectly well that fighting the fortune teller would be pointless. After that, she raised her hand and used some kind of spell, saying that she could finish everyone off with one spell. Kel looked at his sister and asked if this was really true, to which she replied that she didn't want to admit it. But the fortune teller wasn't bluffing, and it could be said that she was stronger than all of them put together. The maid asked with fear in her voice what they should do now. The fortune teller, meanwhile, said that there was no need to start a fight if our heroes obediently followed her. After all, in this case, she can save their lives for a while. Kel held the bow and asked where she was going to take them. The girl opened her eyes and said that she was going to her commander. Ceres said she knew the white guy was already making his move, damn it. The soothsayer, shrouded in magic, said that the commander needed Kel, so he should follow her. Kel drew his bow and asked why he should leave with her if death awaited him anyway. The girl smiled for a second, looked into his eyes and asked, "Doesn't Kel want to extend his life, even if just for a little while?" Kel held her in his sights and thought about how he dreamed of living like in the game, and he was not going to die a miserable death. And if he goes after her, then he is definitely finished. Kel released an arrow that flew at the enemy. He shouted that he would fight to the end for his life. However, the fortune teller easily raised the barrier and blocked the shot. Ceres also used her magic to attack the fortune teller, and Jack also used tree roots. He is the only one who was able to get through the barrier. Yes, and grabbed the girl. The maid also rushed into the attack with the thought that she had always been a burden to our hero, so she was not going to die without doing anything. She rushed to beat this dome and shout that she would protect his highness. But the redhead immediately warned her. She said that under no circumstances should she engage in close combat. Immediately after this, the fortune teller pushed the girl away from herself. She threw off Jack's shackles and said that in that case, all she had to do was bring the dead carcass of our hero to the commander. The girl flew into the air and used the snowstorm spell. At the very last moment, our hero's sister managed to raise the dome to protect herself from this attack. The maid looked at our hero and said that she apologized for being so useless. However, the redhead said that now was not the time for whining, because her shield would not last long. Kel looked at her and asked if she could remove this spell, to which the girl replied that even if she could, it wouldn't work for the fifth. After all, they are on completely different circles of magic. Kel said that the shield is about to crack and at this rate they won't last long and will die at the hands of this bitch. Kel tried to figure out if there was a way, or at least one way, to get out of here alive. Suddenly he remembered something. That creature in his subconscious. It clearly should help. Kel closed his eyes and screamed loudly, trying to dive into his subconscious. The sister looked at her brother in surprise and asked what was going on. Did he really want the shield to crack faster? Kel came out with a huge amount of energy and tried to imagine this dark silhouette. Even the dragon noticed the release of this dark energy. The fortune teller said that she feels the energy of the Demon King in our hero, and it seems to be directed only when he is so tense. She thought for a moment and added that now it was clear why she had been unable to determine his location. But even so, he was already finished. Kel, meanwhile, was trying his best, but he was failing, and he wondered why he couldn't penetrate his subconscious. Shouldn't he be on the brink of life and death when he wants to dive into it? Meanwhile, the shield finally cracked. The redhead declared that it was about to collapse. And after a few seconds, the shield finally fell. Kel looked up and prepared for death. Suddenly, a huge dragon appeared and covered our heroes with its body. They looked at this in surprise and did not understand what was happening. The fortune teller was also surprised because it was the first time she had seen such behavior in dragons. The dragon, meanwhile, descended and covered our heroes from this attack. After that, he bowed before our hero. Kel was surprised it touched his face, and suddenly he saw that the dragon had the same eyes as him. Suddenly, he saw the dragon's memories. In the memories, our hero's mother was floating on it. And this means that they clearly knew each other. Those memories were so bittersweet and tender. The dragon mentally addressed our hero and ordered him to escape. Kel couldn't believe he was hearing the voice of this creature. After these words, the dragon burped up some kind of ball. Kel took it in his hands and asked what it was. It was some kind of dragon in his mind, and she replied that it was his clairvoyant stone. Kel asked why the dragon was giving away this stone. The dragon leaned over a little and said that he didn't have time to explain everything. He ordered to hide his power and run away from here as quickly as possible. He turned around and entered into a fight with the fortune teller. She was incredibly surprised when she realized that the dragon was really helping our hero escape. Kel and the others rushed out of there, thinking that he would deal with what had just happened a little later. The fortune teller defended herself from the attacks and thought that this dragon was truly powerful. However, she did not understand why he intervened anyway, and he gave her food for thought about this world. A few minutes later, the fortune teller said that she had already seen all of his best attacks. She opened her eyes and said that it was quite good, and she would have to strain herself a little. A huge spell circle appeared in the air, from which a meteorite of incredible size emerged. The dragon's eyes opened wide. The last memories floated before my eyes. Soon, there was nothing left of the dragon. Kel sensed it and looked back. However, all he saw was bloody soup. The dragon was dead. The fortune teller slowly descended towards him. She said that a dragon helping demons is a strange thing no matter how you look at it, so she decided to look into his memories before he passed away. But as soon as the dragon heard this, he roared and his body caught fire, almost burning to the ground in a second. He looked at the fortune teller and mentally addressed her. He said that people are selfish and cruel. The time will come when they will pay for everything they have done. After which his ashes were scattered by the wind. The fortune teller was left behind by us, in the middle of the scorched earth. She noted without emotion that the dragon had died and that the bastard had hidden his presence and fled. It was quite problematic. However, she thought that you can't escape fate, and then she used a spell. The girl raised her hands up and hundreds of butterflies appeared. Our heroes, when they broke away from pursuit, tried to understand what they were doing with this dragon here. At first, he tried to kill them, and then unexpectedly saved them. Jack said that he noticed that the dragon wanted to help the master. The sister added that he appeared when Kel used his demonic energy, so they are probably familiar. I was able to look into his memories, and most likely in the past, this dragon knew our hero's mother. The maid immediately said that dragons usually don't get along with demons, so it's surprising that it turned out this way. Kel replied that he did not know. However, in his memories, he clearly felt both joy and bitterness. Jack asked if the dragon had given him anything else, and then Kel held out the stone of clairvoyance. Ceres immediately said that it turns out that he not only slept with them, but also gave away his stone. The girl thought for a bit and said that this was rather strange behavior and that the queen herself probably saved them. Kel held the stone in his hands and tried to understand what kind of relationship there was between this dragon and his mother. After all, there was definitely something in his eyes. Kel gave the stone to Jack and said that they were very lucky anyway. Ceres immediately replied that lucky was not the word, because the white Talcon was already tracking them down, so they needed to prepare for the next arrival. Jack looked at the stone in your hands and said that it was a very rare item. Does Kel really want to give it away? Kel replied that the others had no use for him here, so Jack should eat him. Jack agreed and swallowed the stone. Suddenly, he felt noticeably worse. The guy looked up at the sky and his eyes glowed bright red. He saw the memories. This from the dragon's perspective. Since birth, the dragon was an object for human experiments. They experimented on her, without even thinking about the pain they were causing. And this happened day after day. Generation after generation, they continued to tear her body to pieces, and every time she was close to death, they healed her. And then it all started again. Hundreds of years passed, and the feelings became dull. They broke the psyche of the dragons. Noticing this, people were happy. They said that in their generation the roar stopped, and I can't call it progress. The dragon peacefully surrendered to her death when suddenly someone invaded the base. Turk Khaldun, the most bloodthirsty demon king, began an invasion of people, during which the laboratory was destroyed and the dragon finally gained victory. The dragon was able to escape from this disgusting place. And then, for the first time, she felt what it was like to soar high above the ground. The dragon began to search for her relatives. The third dragon told about the cruelty of people and offered to help the demons in the war with them. However, it came as a surprise to her that no one believed her words. After all, by that time, the dragons had already built friendly relations with people and were ready to fight on their side. Few dragons realized that the reason humans wanted to get close to them was because they wanted to sacrifice their bodies for science. They used dragons to conduct their experiments to learn how to become similar and master their magic. But no one accepted this truth. The dragons refused to believe her, as they already had a strained relationship with the demons. The demons also refused to believe the dragon. Therefore, neither among people, nor among demons, nor even among dragons, there was no place for her. Every day, the dragon wondered why she was born at all, since everyone rejected her and she could do nothing. So what was the meaning of her existence? And then the dragon decided to isolate herself from the outside world. In endless darkness and in deep loneliness, he burned alone, awaiting his death. But one day, she met a little demon, Charist. The little girl looked at the dragon and called him Mom. The dragon was surprised and the girl threw herself into his arms. Charista grabbed the dragon's mouth tightly, tears in her eyes, and then the dragon realized that she had finally found the reason for her birth. The girl who appeared out of nowhere was named Charista. Through magic and memory transfer, the dragon was able to see her dark memories. And if dragons were used for experiments by people, then demons mocked her. After all, even among the demons, there was a cruel group that acted independently of the rest, Tarsika. In their research, they studied and analyzed dragon magic, all in order to subjugate them. As soon as Charista hatched from the egg, Tarsika immediately took her away and began experimenting on her. Possessing the highest magical potential among all of her kind, she could use transformation magic from birth, the most difficult dragon magic. And that was the main reason why Tarsika used her. In constant despair and pain, she developed teleportation magic on her own. So she managed to escape from the laboratory, and she wandered alone for a long time, until I met the dragon. It is unknown what it was, a connected fate or an ordinary coincidence. In any case, after everything they had been through, they simply could not remain strangers to each other. After a couple of days, the girl realized that the dragon in front of her was not her mother, and began to address the dragon as a master. The dragon replied that this was true, and added that he was not the parents, so it was better to call him the master. The girl was incredibly happy and thanked him for it. She screamed that the master is almost like a mother, but he argued and said that the master is a master. Over the course of several years, the dragon taught the girl everything she knew: how the world works, how dragons should live, and how to use their magic. Time flew by with her, unlike those days in the past that turned out to be an eternity. One night, the dragon looked at the girl and thanked her. The girl looked at the master in surprise and asked why, but the dragon replied that she just wanted to thank her. The girl asked with a smile, why? Because she still didn't understand. The dragon was happy that she could watch her grow, and every moment spent next to her gave her happiness that could not be described in words. All the pain that the dragon had once experienced because she was born a dragon seemed to disappear, giving way to the beautiful life in which they had each other. However, changes came when they least expected them. One day the dragon felt someone's presence. The dragon looked at the girl and asked who she was. The girl answered in surprise that she was Charista. The dragon looked at her angrily and asked if she was a human or a demon. The girl screamed that she didn't understand anything and asked if this was some kind of test. The dragon roared loudly and said that no matter who takes over, a human or a demon, she will simply finish him off. The girl couldn't believe that this was happening to her. All the dragon dreamed of was to live a happy life next to Calista. But a body that had undergone many experiments could not serve as long as the bodies of other dragons, and it began to collapse, reaching its limit. Calista asked why the master was doing this. Could it be that she really didn't remember who was in front of her? The dragon stopped, looked behind the girl, and remembered her name. The girl continued to ask if the dragon had come to her senses. What happened? The dragon immediately began to apologize. However, at that moment she realized that they had to break up before the dragon stops recognizing her altogether. One morning, the girl woke up and couldn't find her master anywhere. She cried loudly and did not want to believe that she had really been abandoned. However, the dragon did this for the safety of her dear student and flew away as far as she could and then began to prepare for the end of her life, immersing herself in warm memories and forgetting about her again and again. When most of the memories disappeared, the dragon realized that she had very little time left. But one day, she sensed a bittersweet energy from afar and instinctively followed its trail. Today, on the last day of her life, Dragon finally found it. After all, the only thing that remained in her memory about Calista was her energy. Energy of a precious student. But instead, she met another child. For a moment, through the memories of this boy, I realized that he was the child of Calista. The dragon saw her dear student and daughter. She also became a mother and looked at her son with tenderness. And then the dragon firmly decided that she would not let this precious baby die and would protect him. Dying, the dragon remembered the days with Calista and mentally thanked her for not allowing her last days to dictate without any meaning. It was nice for her to see Calista's child at the end of her very, very long life. All these memories flashed before Jack's eyes in a matter of moments. Tears were pouring from his eyes. Jack was saying that all her memories had been passed on to him. However, it was as if he had woken up from a dream, and the more he tried to remember, the faster he forgot. And now I have not a single one left. The guy slowly stood up and said that the only thing he understood was that he died a happy death. Kel realized that this meant that the fortune teller had killed him after all. Ceres immediately took Jack by the shoulders and said that she did not understand why he was crying so loudly if he could not remember the memories. The guy apologized and said that it seemed that the ability he had just received would not be revealed immediately and that it might take time. And in the worst case, it will be weakly expressed or not manifest at all. Kel thought about it and said that in that case they had no choice and would have to wait for Jack's ability to appear. Jack asked what they should do until then. After all, they didn't know when they would encounter their opponents again. Kel said that we needed to find a safe place and asked to show him the map. Ceres immediately created a map and said that where the blue color is, there is the Empire of People, and where the red light is, there is the Kingdom of Demons. And now they are right on the border between them. Kel said he thought it would be best to head south. The girl was surprised and asked why not go deeper into the land of demons, to which Kel replied that his father did not just send him to people, and Kel was sure that his meeting with Ceres was also part of his plan. But since the demon kingdom had fallen, he probably assumed that humans would launch a large-scale invasion into the demon territory. Redhead replied that this is true, and added that after the death of the Demon King, not only the whites became active, but all the other warriors of the human race will take advantage of the moment to exterminate the demons. The maid said that this meant that they had to rally the demons around themselves. Kel folded his arms and said that it was impossible now. After all, they themselves saw how the earth demons trapped our hero as a cowardly son who ran away from the school of combat. And probably the other demons are of the same opinion, which means that our hero doesn't have enough to unite them all yet. Rin immediately said that they could use Ceres, but the redhead replied that only the Demon King could prove that she was later. After all, when she worked for the Reds, she had no right to vote. But what she did under their command will hardly ever be forgiven. Kel said that, in that case, he first needs to create a dungeon by equipping its base, and then he will deal with his reputation so that the demon will follow him of his own free will. He must show his strength. He was immediately supported and told that it was an excellent plan. Kel confidently stated that by achieving more and more successes, they will make the demons believe in them for the fifth and thus prove their worth and become the pillars of the new demon empire. After that, Kel approached the cart and said that they would need time to strengthen their positions and develop a strategy and build a dungeon in the south. And then they immediately supported him. Kel thought that it was nice that despite the clumsy plan, they still supported him. Kel looked at the others, thinking that there were reliable comrades around, but a monster with unimaginable power was on his tail, so it was too dangerous to face the whites now and he needed to get more information. And if he recalled everything that Kel had experienced here, a lot of it resembled a game. From magic spells to the names of monsters, everything was damn familiar. And if the connection between this world and his past life does exist, then Kel can use the power and status of the Demon King's son to get everything he needs. And the knowledge from the past will help him develop a survival strategy. Kel was completely confident that this time victory would definitely be his. Meanwhile, a squad of whites slaughtered one of the demon villages. The demons surrendered, but the whites didn't care. They continued to kill and burn villages. And those who were indignant were killed with particular cruelty. A few minutes later, the tank approached the main one and said that they were finished here. Killian, meanwhile, was talking to the fortune teller and was surprised that the dragon helped our hero. The fortune teller also added that I was unable to find out the reason. After that, he asked where she found them, and the girl explained that she found them on the border very close to the territory of the earth demons. The girl said that this is true and added that she sent butterflies to look for them. Killian thought for a moment and said that it was unlikely that Kel would venture into the land of demons engulfed in flames. After this, he ordered to pack up and head towards the fortune tellers. The elf looked at her commander in surprise and asked what they should do with the rest of the demons, since it would be better to get rid of them all at once. To which the commanders replied that they would do this only after they had dealt with our hero. A week passed. Kel and his team all this time ran without a break to the south. Kel thought that on the way here, they had encountered white people more than once, and it would be good to avoid meeting them altogether, at least until Kel was ready. Suddenly, the unicorn stopped abruptly and refused to gallop further. Jack explained that the animals realized that they could not survive in the conditions that lay ahead. Kel replied that it was no problem because they had already reached the right place. Jack got off his unicorn and wished him a good journey, after which they all said goodbye. It was quite cold here, and the maid said that in such weather not only people but also demons would have a hard time. Kel replied that this location was ideal and suggested looking for a suitable place. Meanwhile, one of the fortune teller's butterflies came across 4 unicorns. The fortune teller was surprised when she learned that they were moving north. What confused her even more was that there were exactly 4 of them. Our heroes, meanwhile, found something interesting and thought that a cave on such an island would be the safest option. Kel looked at Jack and asked if he could clarify if there was anyone there or not, and if there were monsters on it at all. But Jack apologized and said that his inner eye only responded to nature. Ceres approached the boats that were here and said that judging by how old they were, there had been no people here for a long time. Kel asked if they could use these boats, and she replied that they looked quite suitable. The island was only 200 meters from the shore. It's not that far, but the depth is significant, and the waves are also strong. So, Kel thought that they would quickly notice if someone decided to invade here. When they entered the cave, Kel said that the entrance here was much wider than he had previously thought, and asked the redhead to cast illusion magic on the cave. She quickly did her job, and they moved a little deeper. Kel noticed that it looked like someone had already lived here, so he suggested looking around first. Suddenly, they came across a fork in the road. Kel looked at Jack and asked him to describe the directions. The guy explained that on each side there is a narrow path that leads to its own room, and then they narrow and connect to a more spacious room at the end. It is deeper than the previous ones. On the side there is a small exit from the cave. Kel suggested that we split up and explore both routes and then meet in that room. Ceres hugged our hero and declared that she would go with him. Rin immediately grabbed our hero by the hand and declared that she would go with the master. She said that no one knows what might happen in these tunnels, so the strongest must split up. Ceres thought about it and said that this was indeed the case, so she would go with Jack. Kel asked them to make sure to check anything that might raise suspicion, and then meet at the center. Jack and the redhead went in their direction and noticed that the stones here were emitting light. The redhead explained that these were light stones, and that ice and light magic was used to create them. And since they were still burning, she had done everything with a truly skillful move. Suddenly, the redhead said that she still doesn't trust Jack. The guy apologized and asked what she was getting at. The girl looked back and said that they were on the same team only because Kel trusted him. However, she was not one of those who made friends easily. The guy closed his eyes and said that in that case she could not bother calling him her comrade and could simply consider him a slave. Upon hearing this, the girl immediately turned away and said that she still didn't like him. Meanwhile, Kel and the maid walked through the cave and thought about how cool it would be if they could create their own stones too. Suddenly, the maid asked our hero to stop and said that there was a tricky stone here, and added that it was good that she noticed it. Otherwise, they could have tripped. Kel looked at her and tried to understand where so much enthusiasm came from, because she was not like that at all before. Suddenly, Kel noticed slime on the floor. He was very happy because he had only seen such things in toys, and all his life he had dreamed of touching it at least once. However, unexpectedly, the maid immediately finished him off. She destroyed it with ease, looked at our hero, and smiled. Kel wondered if they were leaving, and she was expecting gratitude from him. Kel sadly praised her, which made the girl incredibly happy. Suddenly, the earth shook, and the ceiling above them did too. A huge stone golem appeared out of nowhere. Kel immediately ordered the maid to hide behind him. However, she enveloped her body in energy and said that she would no longer be a burden and would erase anyone who stood in their way.